Water is going to be one of those inorganic compounds that is absolutely essential to living organisms. It makes up 60 to 80% of the volume in living cells, and so it's the most important inorganic compound in living organisms. And part of this is because it has so many special properties that we're going to talk about. One of the things I want you to notice is, if you remember when we were talking about the ionic bonds that make salt crystals of sodium chloride, remember these are ions and their attraction is so strong that they stick together and form crystals. Well, one of the beautiful things about water being a polar molecule, so water is polar, and if you remember why, it's got this net positive charge on one side where the hydrogens are and a net negative charge on the oxygen side, and that's because those electrons are not being equally shared. And because of this kind of charge existing on either side of the molecule, it can actually get in here and break up these bonds between the sodium and the chloride. And that's why when you put salt crystals into water, they will dissolve, because the properties of the water molecule, the polarity of it, will get in there, and this positive side will be attracted to this negative ion chloride and will wrap itself around there, pulling it away from the sodium ion. By the same token, the negative side of the oxygen will wrap itself around the positive sodium ion. And so this is one of the many awesome characteristics of water. What are some of the properties of water? One, it has a high heat capacity. What this means to us is it's able to absorb and release heat without changing temperature much. So it can withstand a lot of temperature change and can hold heat. That's awesome because that prevents sudden changes in our body temperature. It's one of the reasons why when our body temperature gets hot and we start to sweat, the water of sweat can take that heat from the inside of our body. By the same token, water has a high heat of vaporization or vaporization. And what this means is that water can evaporate, but it requires a lot of heat to evaporate. And so when our body temperature does go up and we sweat, the water can withstand that temperature change, but it can also utilize that high temperature to evaporate on our skin, which allows us to be able to cool down. It's also, like I said on the previous slide, a polar solvent. So it's able to dissolve and dissociate those ionic bonds and those ionic substances such as salts. It can form hydration layers or water layers around charged molecules. So for instance, around proteins. We see this in colloid mixtures where you've got water wrapping around colloid or protein molecules, making a colloid. And that's going to help as well. This polar property or characteristic is going to help aid us in transporting things around the body, especially in blood. It's also got a property of reactivity because of its polarity. It can be involved in hydrolysis as well as dehydration synthesis reactions. Essentially, it helps us make bigger components or polymers by dehydration, and it also helps us break down polymers into smaller monomers with hydrolysis. Water can also act as a cushioning mechanism. It can protect organs from trauma. Cerebrospinal fluid is the fluid that's predominantly made of water, and it surrounds our brain, help protecting and cushioning our brain. So there are many properties of water that make it essential for how we survive. Here's just a joke for you. Help, help, I'm dissolving. This is a polar bear. And you have a regular bear or another type of bear saying, but bears are insoluble. And this one says, but that's easy for you to say, you're not polar. Ha ha ha. Water is polar. Don't forget it.